So I just finished putting together the exposure for video training course number 1 playlist. Really, I just put this together because I wanted to combine some resources that I found on YouTube to help beginners at least understand the process of having a camera and what video cameras and photography cameras and all those settings mean inside of the camera to help you understand as you learn in the process. Really, exposing your camera is the basic to understanding how to get good images and doing video. And exposing your camera is literally the process of getting an image, both with photography and videography. I just wanted to put this at the top to let you know you're going to hear terms in this course by these creators. I've watched them all through myself. You're going to hear terms like ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. And you're going to hear things like white balance, but we'll talk about that on another playlist. Right now, we're talking about the fundamentals inside every single camera. So anytime you pick up a camera, you're going to be looking for these 3 things. There's going to be other things you look for, but at least as a beginner, you learn these steps really well. If you go through and you're not following certain things that are being said very well, then I encourage you. There's only a few videos in this playlist for the beginning session of exposure for camera. So rewatch it, go back and re-listen to. Repetition is always going to be your friend when you're making video because there's a lot of stuff to remember. But honestly, once you remember it and it becomes ingrained in your mind, then you'll just become a better videographer and you'll know these things more naturally. And so I wanted to also just clarify because as I watched through, I didn't hear someone say this audibly. So for beginners, I think this is important. When you hear the term aperture and you hear the term f-stop, I want you to know those are the same thing. So you see a couple videos in this playlist that talks about those together, but you might get confused if you don't know right off the top that aperture and f-stop are the same thing. F-stop is used more commonly in video and aperture is used more commonly in photography. However, people still use those terminologies for both industries. So that's why people say it back to back because they don't really know who they're talking to, and they want people to understand as you go into the industry that aperture and video, well, aperture and f-stop for video and photography are the same thing. So try not to get confused as you hear those terms, and so as you go through, make a mental note when you hear the term aperture and f-stop, they're talking about the same thing. It just happens to be 2 different names. And it's kind of funny, in this industry, there's a lot of things that have the same name. For example, ISO, you're going to hear that a lot in this playlist as well. ISO can also be referred to as gain. Gain is something you hear a lot in video, especially like with Sony cameras and whatnot. They still refer to that as gain, but ISO and gain are the same thing. So if you're opening a camera and you're trying to look for the ISO to change the settings, you might find the term ISO depending on what camera you have, or you might find the word gain. And again, it's the same thing. They're talking about the same thing. They affect the camera the exact same way. So as you're going through this, try to keep note of maybe those 2 things. ISO and gain are the same thing. Aperture and f-stop are the same thing. And also, if you don't understand something, rewatch it or complete the whole playlist and then go back up to the top and rewatch it and really try to get ingrained in your mind these basic principles. Because once you understand these, honestly, everything else will come together and fit and make sense. So it's very important that right out of the gate you learn the settings inside every single camera, how to expose to get your image. It's a little bit ironic that I'm recording with my phone right now because everything's on auto and it doesn't look good, and you'll see that if you go back and watch this video. But I'm doing this just for convenience, just so I can get my point across. Don't film on your camera for your phone unless you're just trying to get some information out there to help people learn in this process. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this playlist, and yeah, I guess just enjoy it.